Welcome back, everyone. In today's video, we're going to be going over for loops for the multi-attack. We're going to be able to attack multiple amount of times without duplicating code using for loops. We're going to build the enemy cycle where the enemy can attack back, and we're going to change the if statements to switch statements to show kind of how switch statements are a different type of case statement ability. First, we're going to go handle the for loop. So if you remember before, for our player, we have four options. You could either choose to do a single attack, which we already coded, where you do a random attack between 1 through 15. We do a 3-strike attack, which we're going to build now, which you can do a 3-strike, defend, and attempt to run away. So for the 3-strike, which is here, we're going to say you chose to 3-strike attack. We're going to add here the 3-strike attack. Alright, we're going to end the quote. And just like above, which is right here, we're going to just put his name. So we're just saying like, oh, you decided 3-strike attack the enemy name, so you know what the enemy name is. So how are we going to do the 3-strike attack? Well, if you remember, we have this ability, or this function we made called gets hit. So we can attack the enemy with a random attack 3 times. I mean, one time happens here. The first enemy gets hit, it does damage between 1 through 15. We can copy and paste this 3 times, and we have a 3-strike attack. Yay! All done, right? No. This is bad coding practice. You don't, in this case, we're only doing 3, so it's fine. But what happens if you had a 100-strike attack? Are you just going to hold paste and put the code in that many times? Technically, that would work, but that's not good. Good coding practice would be to put this in a for loop, where you write the code once and it repeats multiple times. And in this case, this code is unmaintainable. What happens if this number gets changed here, and then all of a sudden, randomly, you're like, oh, there's a bug that on attack 6 can only do 1 damage, or like it's unreadable. What if you're reading the code and you're like, hey, the player's actions 2, console line, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, gets hit? Why am he getting hit this many times? How many times is this? Do I have to count each individual one? It's not maintainable. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to write a for loop. A for loop is different than a while loop that we did before, where the while loop says do this while this condition is true. A for loop says do everything inside this loop multiple times up to a number of times. So you could say do this 3 times, do this 8 times, something of that nature. So in this case, we're going to do it 3 times because it's a 3-strike attack. So as I've mentioned before, if you type in for, it is a code snippet, so you can hit tab and it'll write itself for you, because CSharp and Visual Studio, yeah. So here we have the first part of the for loop was where you define the counter variable. By default, this is always called I, but if you named a variable before as I, you would have to change it, or if you want to change it to something else, you can. This doesn't have to be an int, but normally it is an int. You can count by anything you want, but in this case, an int, an I, and it starts at 0. For most arrays, which we'll talk about later in programming, you tend to count from 0. So 0 through 9 would be 10 separate numbers, because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we start here at 0. Now, then the semicolon here then says the next part is how many times do you want to repeat, and we're going to say this code here has to result in a boolean of either true or false. When we say I is less than length, we're able to say how many times we want to go. So in this case, we're saying 3. So if it's 0 is less than 3, true. 1 is less than 3, true, continue. 2 is less than 3, continue. Is 3 less than 3? No, because we didn't say less than and equals to. We said is less than. So 3 is not less than 3. Therefore, you only ran the code 3 times, which is what we want. You could also, if you wanted to count a little differently, even though I would not recommend this, if you said equals 1 and then less than equals 3, then you have 1, 2, 3, but you have equals, but then you're not going to see that very often. If you look up something on Stack Overflow, you're trying to get help with programming, people aren't going to tend to write like this. You typically would start counting from 0, and it would be less than that number, because this is saying you don't end on 3. Like 3 times happens, but since you started at 0, it's going to technically I is going to be 2 at the end of this, but which is same. So after this semicolon, we say what we're going to do with I afterwards. In this case, we're saying I plus plus, and what I plus plus means is the equivalent. It's a shorthand trick of saying I equals. I have to do it in here. I equals I plus 1. If we do that and this are exactly the same thing. So I equals I plus 1 means that, assign I to the value of the arithmetic expression on the right, which is what the current value of I is, plus 1. So if this is 4, take 4 plus 1, now it's 5. Here we're saying plus plus is just saying exactly this, like take I and add exactly 1 to it. There is no plus 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 plus. Like you can't just go crazy on the pluses and then expect it to add 2. There's just a little shorthand for literally adding 1 to a number is the I plus plus. So in this case, since I said we have to comment everything, loop 3 times to perform our multi-attack. Now, we know from the single attack what we can do here, and then in this for loop, we're going to put that enemy gets hit attack for 1 through 15. So in this case now, we're going to the code's going to run, we're going to get here, we're going to go through the for loop, it's going to count at 0. So the first time through, the enemy's going to get hit. Now after this parentheses here, and it comes back at the top, I plus plus means that I is now increased by 1. So now I equals 1. It's less than 3, yes. Gets hit again. Comes back up, loops around. Now I equals 2. I is less than 3, yes. The enemy gets hit. Loops around. I equals 3. I is not equal less than 3. Now we just skip this and continue past that code. The code here now runs after 3. Because we're going down. Code is read from the top to the bottom. In this case, we don't need to do anything else. So in this case, we just did a multi-attack, hit him 3 times, and we're good. So let's try that out. So I'm building the code. I hit F5 on the keyboard. Okay, so what is your name? David. Take your name, David. You have encountered a giant enemy crab. What would you like to do? I would like to do a 3-strike attack. Boom. It says you chose to 3-strike the giant enemy crab. So giant enemy crab was hit for 4 damage. He has now 96. And what would you like to do? So as you can see, I attacked 3 times. I wrote the attack code once right here, but since it's in a for loop, it happened 3 times. Now, if I wanted to, just to be funny, let's make it 300, and you'll see that when I do the multi-attack now, it's going to occur 300 times. Alright, so now we're going to do the 3-strike attack, which is actually 300-strike attack. So now we attacked him 300 times, as you can see. You can scroll through the console and see all the times we attacked him. And seems like he died on like the 20th hit or something. And then after that, we just went really overkill. We just literally beat his dead body. This giant enemy crab just sitting there. We're just like... Okay, so let's get rid of this 300, because that's a little excessive. We're only gonna do 3 because it's a multi-attack. So that's the first part of the tutorial. Now, for the enemy to attack back, we want the enemy to be able to attack back the player. So we're gonna do something similar to this gets hit, but for the player. So if we go over to the player, we can say we're going to make a new function that's public. So public void gets hit. So we're going to name it the same as the other function. The player gets hit, which is going to be very similar to this function. So we're going to take the hit value, and actually we're gonna copy this just because it'll be a little quicker instead of typing it all. So this gets called when the player is hit. So we gotta make sure we change the comment. If you copy and paste whatever, make sure you read over what you copy and pasted. Because if you just copy and paste random stuff, people are gonna start knowing, and you're gonna possibly introduce code error. And what I mean by people are knowing is if you copy and pasted it like this right here, and we're in the player, and it's like this gets called when the enemy is hit, people are gonna get confused. Like, why is this called? Why is players get hit called when the enemy is hit? Shouldn't the enemy be hit? And then it causes confusion. It's like, did you just copy and paste this? So that's why you gotta change it. It's like when you copy a test answer at school, you gotta change your name, right? Don't do that. This is called when the player is hit. Hit value, the amount of damage the player will take. So here we're going to subtract our health value. That's still correct because we want to minus our current health with the value of the hit value. And then we want to write out that the player got it. So it's player got hit, so now we know that's also a spelling mistake in the enemy function. So name was hit for hit value damage. He now, or I'm going to say you because we don't know if it's he. He now has. So it's half for us. You now have. What? Have. I'm going to say health remaining. Okay. Check if the player is dead. And then if so, the player is dead, in which case we will add a die function, which is going to be very similar to the player function. The enemy function called when the player is supposed to die. Write to the console that the player is dead, the name has died. Set the boolean that this player has died. We don't have is dead, but we can add is dead, which is similar to determines if the player is dead. Okay. Hold on a second. Must hydrate. We took in the player's action. We performed an action off of the player. Now we want to give the enemy the chance to attack. So this if-else chain goes all the way here. So after the end of this else, if we go after these squiggly lines, this is where the code is going to continue in this while loop. So now we're going to say have the enemy attack the player. Have the enemy attack the player. Okay, so here we're going to say player dot gets hit, and we're going to do the same random code. Oops, random dot next, and we're going to attack 1 through 5 because this enemy is weaker. So we can only attack 1 through 5. So the enemy is going to attack, and then it's going to pass here, loop, and continue. So at this point, the way we have it, which I'll show real fast, I'm going to say David, let's see, 2. So I attacked him 3 times. He's got 76 health remaining. And then David was hit for 1 damage. After all that, I hit this guy so much, and he hits me one damage. I have 99 health. This giant enemy crab isn't too intimidating. So what would you like to do? So I'm going to attack him once. And he's like, you chose to single attack the giant enemy crab. Giant enemy crab is hit for 6 damage. David is hit for 1 damage. You have now 90. Oh, this guy's getting unlucky. Now he hit me for 3 damage. Now I got 95 health. So as you can see, we're going back and forth. The issue now is going to be when I kill this guy. I kill him. If I die, I got unlucky there because here. Let me change this here, and I'll be able to show you. So if he attacks 1,000 to 2,000, you'll see that the problem is that if At this point, David was hit for 1,950 damage. This giant enemy crab ate his breakfast this morning. You now have negative 1,850 health remaining, so David has died. What would you like to do? Attack. So now I'm dead and I'm attacking. We have to end the game there. So we have to add additional checks here to the while loop. So if we go to the while loop, you can say, while the first enemy is not dead and the player is not dead. So I'm going to change the comment because the comment still has to make English sense so people who are reading will know. While the first enemy and player are not dead. While the first enemy and player are not dead, repeat the playable cycle. So this is going to continue until somebody dies. So let's see this in action. So I type in David. I'm going to do my single attack. And you can see that David has died. And I now left the program. Yeah, right here. So I'm show reading it. David has died. And then the program stops and it ends. So now I'm going to show switch statements where we can do the same thing as if statements, but switch statements might be a different way of putting out actions. Now, there's certain times you want to make switch statements as opposed to if statements, and that's based off of the code structure and what items you're currently doing. It's not necessarily the case that one is better than the other. It's just preference and in terms of use. So in this case, we have the if statement with if and then else and then if, else, and then player. All this is based off the player's action. So if we're just determining based off the player's action a certain route, we can use a switch statement instead. So here I'm going to say exactly what it was here. Check what action the player took. So in here I say switch, and I could hit tab, as I mentioned before. So it's switch. What do you want to switch on? So see it. You can see the little helper thing says what's switch on. Expressions is switch on. In this case, we're going to switch on the player's action. So now, when you have a switch statement, you say the case. So in the case that the player's action is 1, the string 1, then do the following in that code. And then case 2, and then 3 and 4. If we don't match any of these cases, we're going to fall, like when you choose 5, you go into the default case, and then you go inside there. Now when you have cases on top of each other like this, case 1, 2, 3, and 4 are going to do the code. That's going to be in here. Code here. Basically, the cases here keep falling down until you say break. That's where the code will break. So here, if I say break here, and I can say console.writeLine, I'm gonna just put something here so you guys can see. So here, if I say case 1, 2, or 3, it's going to fall down until it reaches a part where code starts. It's going to write out test, and then it's going to stop. And then by breaking, you leave this switch statement, and then you continue your code down here. In the case of 4, I'm going to come to this switch statement here. And because the default, this is good. This is on the error here. I'm going to do break here. So in case 4, we're writing out the console line test, and then we're breaking, and we're continuing on. If I entered 5 for the player's action, or just hello or something of that nature, there is no case, so we go to default here, and then we immediately break out and continue and do nothing. So in this case, we're just going to copy and paste the code that we already have here into the switch statement, just so we can have it in a switch statement way. So here, if it's 1, we're just going to put 1, except now we got to say break, so we break and stay inside 1, and then 2, and then we're going to say break, 3. Oh, okay. I was gonna say, I'm seeing little errors here. And then for right out that we chose 4. And then 5, you chose to do something else. So now this if statement, I can just delete all of this. So as you can see, it's written in a different way, but accomplishes the same thing. We're switching off the player's action. And then in the case that the player's action was 1, it'd be good. Now you wouldn't be able to do this if you wanted to have the if statement be like, well, if the player is dead, else if the enemy crab is dead, else if the player's action is 2, else if today's date is Saturday. Like if you had it on multiple different things, you would have to have multiple if statements. But if it's always going to be off of one thing, if the player's action is this, else if the player's action is this, else if the player's action is this, else if the player's action is this, then you can do a switch statement because you're switching off of the player's action. You're making a switch off of what he chose. You know, you're sitting here, I have a single thing, I'm making a switch on what I'm doing based off of if you chose 1, 2, 3, 4. So, but you could still write it with if else's. It's just, you know, this is how you can do it. So as just a review for today, or this video, we made it so the player can die, the enemy attacks back. Once the player or the enemy dies, we leave this while loop, and we now have a multi-attack. In the next video, we're going to create the ability to defend, and I'm actually going to change this because I don't really see the point of running away. I'm going to change this to be heal. So you can heal yourself. So you can defend or heal yourself. So we're going to implement the ability to defend or heal yourself in the game. And then we're going to encounter the boss character where we do the same game flow as this, except instead of attacking the giant enemy crab, we're going to attack the boss. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe to get video notifications. Hit that bell notification to get notifications, and I will see you in the next video.